Hey guys, join me as we revisit author G. Michael Vasey, and we have a great talk about black-eyed kids. We'll be right back. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust, turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Hey, welcome to the show. As you can tell, we're on a little earlier today. I have a special guest that's on from Europe. This is why we're on early, but this guest is so cool. My name is Charlotte, and I'll be your host for the next hour or so. And I am the owner and operator of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team at www.californiahaunts.org. We are 35 strong up and down the state of California, plus we have members in Oregon, Washington, Nevada, and Hawaii. But I just want to welcome our guest, G. Michael Vasey. I am a big fan of his books. I have read his Black-Eyed Kids book, his Black-Eyed Children books religiously. I just find that so interesting, and his background is interesting as well. So we're going to ask him about that. The other night, along this line, I have a kind of humorous story in that my mother and I, when she was alive, we used to go out to McDonald's like at midnight or 1 o'clock, because my dad would be asleep and it'd be like a relaxing day for her. And we'd go get a burger and we'd sit down and just chat and unwind for the day. The other night, I was Saturday night. I had a stressful day, so I decided to go do the same thing. Went to the McDonald's that was really busy with people, and got my food, parked, and I was just sitting there eating and thinking about today's topic, the black-eyed children trying to access your car and access your house and all that. And sure enough, a young girl knocked on my window and tried to open my car door. And the first thing I thought was, oh my God, it's one of them. So I remember instead of saying, well, who are you? What do you want? My first reaction was, go away, leave me alone. And that's all because I was thinking about tonight's show. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to bring Mr. Vasey on.
Can you hear me? Everything?
Yes. Good. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Not too bad. My hair's a mess, I notice. Never mind. I'm growing it.
There you go.
I'm in the midst of growing it, and I can't do anything at all except, just keep it out of my eyes, basically.
That works. It's a work in progress. That's
all.
Absolutely.
I
have been a fan of yours for years. Reading your books. Yes.
Well, that's nice to know.
Absolute fan. And your Black-Eyed Children book just scared the living hell out of me. And
they scared the living hell out of me too.
That topic scares me because you just because I'm a person like at night, and I don't want to say this publicly, but at night, because my house gets really hot, I don't have air conditioning right now. I will leave my front door open at I'll just lock the screen, and then I'll have an attic fan going on, and that's my thought is one day they're going to walk up for something to my front door, and I'll have to deal with that.
Well, I tell you, when you do what I do, which is collect stories and write books, I'm not that scared usually, but after writing that book, there was 1 or 2 nights when I woke up at, say, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning here in this apartment, thinking I'd heard a knock. Yeah.
Yeah.
And trust me, it took me a long time to get back to sleep.
It's creepy because, well, I'll let you tell some of the stories, but they'll even show up at your back door, and it's just like, What the heck? What are these things?
Who knows? I tried to come up with my own theory, and it tends to agree with other people who do work in the life after death and spirituality side of things, that there are parallel universes with other types of entities, and some of those entities have been around for longer than us and probably be around long after us, and they do feed on human emotion, fear, lust, that kind of thing. And I'm just of the mind that that's what the black-eyed people are. They're basically demonic, what we call demonic entities that try to create the fear emotion that they need to sustain themselves. They're like a vampire, basically.
Wow. Before we start getting into this, you have a unique background. So let's hear about your background so people understand why you got into writing this stuff.
Well, I grew up as a child in a place called Hull in England, on the east coast of England. And basically, I saw ghosts. I mean, I was living in a house that to me was haunted. We had poltergeist activity. I'd come home from school, put my keys on the window ledge in the hallway for the next day, come back half an hour later, they're gone. I go up to brush my teeth and they'd be in the bathroom sink. And it certainly wasn't my brothers or my father playing tricks, which is what we thought at first, you know. And I saw ghosts, a cavalier ghost, and all kinds of other strange things that happened to me. And it really caused me to be very scared. I mean, I still do sometimes sleep with the lights on. And I used to sleep with the lights on under the covers, you know, just this mouth so I could breathe. And yeah, I mean, I had a very tough growing up. And I was always interested in the magical, the spiritual, the sort of paranormal as well. And I felt like I was playing with fire because the more I read about it, the more happened in my life, yeah. Mm-hmm. And so when I got to, I had all these experiences. When I got to be, I don't know, early 20s, after I graduated and left college and got a job and started a family, I think life just catches up and you just get into the routine of things. And a lot of this stuff went away, although from time to time, strange things would happen. And I guess when I got to be about 35, I was living in Houston, Texas, actually. And I just decided, you know, now's the time to do something. So I studied with a school of magic out of the Channel Islands in the UK called the Servants of the Light. Wow. And I did their 5-year course, correspondence course. And I went over to the UK and I did a few weekend sessions and workshops and things. And eventually they invited me in, and I was initiated a couple of times and became a supervisor and took on students for them, that kind of thing. I did leave the school, I don't know, a couple of 3 years ago, and sort of been solo ever since. And in the process of doing all that, I wrote a book back in 2005 called Inner Journeys, Explorations of the Soul. And the idea behind the book was to talk about the motivations for joining a school of magic, a real school of magic, and what I learned and how I developed a spirit contact doing the course. And so I happened to recount a number of these stories of growing up, like the little blue man that jumped out the mirrored wardrobe and shot me with a gun that said bang, scampered across the bed and went through the glass and jumped out. And my parents came running upstairs because they heard the gunshot. Wow. Explain that, right? And I must have been about 3 or 4 years old at the time. And that was basically the start of it, right? So I put these stories in the book. And the book kind of sold, 50, 60, 70 copies. Nothing special. It's still on sale now from Thoth Publications. And I started thinking, what else could I write about? And someone said to me, well, why don't you take those stories of, ghosts when you were growing up, excuse me, and turn it into a proper book? So I thought, well, that's not a bad idea. So I wrote My Haunted Life, which was the first of a trilogy. And I wanted to follow that up. So I started talking to family members and friends, everybody's got a story. What happened to you? Have you ever seen a ghost? Have you ever had a strange experience? So I started to collect these stories. And I wrote My Haunted Life 2, My Haunted Life 3, as you do. And then I thought, well, why not build a website? So I built a website called myhauntedlife2.com, which is still out there, and people start submitting stories. Mm-hmm. And that gives you not just good material, but it gives you a lot of ideas, because I have a PhD and I'm the kind of guy that I'm not content just to listen to a story. I want to try to explain what's going on. And so I started to pick topics or themes like ghosts in the machine, ghosts calling you on your mobile phone, things like this, going in a hotel room and the TV switches itself on, that kind of thing. What would cause that kind of phenomena? So I started to do background investigation. And this was all going great, and the books were selling, not bad, but never going to be, multi-billionaire or anything. In fact, you're talking a few tens of dollars every month, but still it's a hobby, and it's nice to get some money from a hobby, right? And then one day this story got submitted to the website and I read it. Now, very little scared me at this point because I'd seen everything in all the stories about ghosts and skeletons and ghoulies and everything you could possibly imagine. And I'd heard of black-eyed kids, but only kind of vaguely. I thought it was just like, just a myth, really. And the story came in and I sat and I read it and literally I could feel the ice crawling up the back of my neck, and I'm thinking, good Lord, this is a pretty unpleasant scenario. And so I put it on the website, and we did a bit of promotion. I have a friend that helps me with promotion, Facebook and stuff like that. And before I knew it, all these stories were flooding in about black-eyed kids, black-eyed people, all of these encounter stories. And I thought, okay, what's going on here then? So I started to do some internet research. I came across Brian Bethel, who was basically kind of credited with the first story about black-eyed kids, which, as you were talking about sitting in the car and the knock on the window, Brian Bethel's story is he's sitting in his car and there's a knock on the window, but there really are black-eyed kids and they want a ride. Let me in, we need to go somewhere.
Exactly.
And this was, I guess this was in the time when the internet was just becoming a thing. So it was on a bulletin board and it took off, and all kinds of other stories were published on this bulletin board. And so for many people, Brian Bethel had the first black-eyed kid encounter. But what I discovered was that's not true. Black-eyed kid encounter stories go back decades and, in fact, maybe centuries. And it seems to me that this black-eyed ghoulie has been around for as long as we have in one form or another. And there's a couple of things I like to clear up because I've read a few internet sort of accounts of my book on black-eyed kids, and people say that I say it's an Indian spirit. That's not what I say at all. What I say is there's an example of this kind of entity in a different century, in a different culture. I'm not saying that's where it came from. I'm saying that it's just another example of a black-eyed vampire type entity. And because it's a different culture, because it's a native Indian culture, the story comes out a little bit differently. And the classic story of black-eyed kid encounters that the book is full of is very much a North American cultural phenomena. That's why there's a bit of a myth or whatever, about a mythos about it. And I think that the culture and the phenomena adapts to the culture, right? So in North America, the typical story goes, you sat at home alone, it's late at night, there's a knock on the door. You feel uncomfortable already, and you don't really know why, and you go to the door, and you open the door, and it can be like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and there'll be 2 small kids on the doorstep. They'll be dressed in fairly formal clothing, maybe black and white, and maybe a little old-fashioned looking, and they will ask quite nicely and demurely, can I come in? Maybe I want to use the phone, I want to use the telegraph in one instance, I need to call somebody, I need to contact somebody, we need to come in. And at this point, the person who's answered the door is beginning to feel really extremely frightened with no real explanation, can't explain it. And because it's 2 young kids, very vulnerable, early hours of the morning, you really want to help them. You really want to find out what the problem is, why are you out there at this time in the morning, and who do you need to call? But on the other hand, you feel in mortal danger. There's some weirdness about these kids that seems to have people really frightened. And that's when they notice the black eyes. There's no white, there's no pupil, it's all black. And of course that sends the fear of God, and they slam the door shut. And then they're subjected to hours of door knocking, which eventually will stop, and it all goes quiet. And of course, that's often supplemented with other things like electrical malfunctions, the lights flicker on and off, the TV stops. there's also another sort of aspect to it which I find quite fascinating, which is that often the person who answers the door is the only one that sees and hears the kids. There might be a couple of people in the house, both of whom will see and hear them, but there'll be, if it was snowing, there's no footprints. If it's wet, there's no footprints. Neighbours didn't hear anything, even though they were knocking, so loud on the door it would wake the dead. The neighbours don't hear it. So it's almost as if it happens within their universe and not within our shared universe. So it's something they experience, but other people don't experience it alongside of them, which I think is really weird, but also symptomatic of this kind of entity, transdimensional entity, if you want, that can be seen by you, but not by me, or can be seen by you, but not actually leave any evidence it's been there, unless, of course, they want to. Because in one story that got submitted, I really thought it was quite interesting that the boy was chewing an apple, and they told him go away, and eventually he did go away. But when they opened the door, the apple was on the doorstep, half-eaten apple. And I think the reason why it's so chilling is because what you've got is innocence on the doorstep, which is total evil, yeah. And that combination of innocence but evil is really quite chilling and very frightening, don't you think?
I do. I find the whole thing frightening. I really do. There's the other ones that scare me, and I know I've heard stories of them when people have children in cars.
Yeah, well, Brian Bethel's story is sitting in his car, and I can't remember whether he was going to a concert or something, and there was a knock on the window, and it was black-eyed kids trying to get into his car. These kids also, there's a couple of stories that I got submitted where it's like US Armed Forces bases. How do they breach security and get into a US Armed Forces base? And yet there they were. And of course, I always like to joke about Walmart, because half of the stories of black-eyed people happened in Walmart. So if you're on your way to Walmart, just be careful, because that seems to be a definite haunt of black-eyed people.
And aren't there stories of people that have children in cars and they invite the kids in? I've heard a couple stories where somebody's driving and they look in their rearview mirror and there's one sitting in the back seat with their kid.
I haven't had any stories like that, but that would scare the hell out of me. There are very few stories where the black-eyed kids are actually let in to either the car or the house, and I could only find two. One that was sent to me where the two people, their animals died, ran away, he got cancer, and they had a whole bunch of after effects from black-eyed kids. And the other one was something I found on the internet and kind of quoted, where the neighbors disappeared and they suspected that the neighbors had let them in, and so all of these stories, they never get let in. Well, someone must let them in. So what the hell happens to the people that let them in?
Right.
And then you compare that to the number of people that disappear in North America every single day. If you put two and two together, you can come up with 5 or 4,
Yeah. Well, and it's not just at night, though, because there's no reports of them showing up during the day, too? Where people
yeah. In perfectly normal daytime hours and in the street, the black-eyed person stories in the sort of Walmart parking lot where the woman's walking to a car and what she thinks is a homeless person shouts to her, I can't remember her exact name, so let's say she was called Cynthia. Hello, Cynthia, how are you? Can you give me a ride? And she looks shocked because how the hell can this homeless person know her name, And then she notices black eyes, whoosh, gone.
What do you think they are? Or where do you think they come from?
Well, like I said, I think that they're interdimensional beings, because we live in a universe, and we think that this is it. But I know from things like Kabbalah, magical practice around Kabbalah, there are 10 spheres. There are 10 spheres on the Tree of Life, and one hidden one too. So there are 11 in total, and there are 4 worlds in the Kabbalah. So that's 44 different universes. each with its own reality, each with its own state of vibration, and that's just one view of creation. If you look at science, multiverses, multiple universes, there's all kind. It's not just paranormal people that postulate many different universes. It's also postulated in real hard science, and it's postulated in magic. In magic, we talk to spirits and agencies of different dimensions in order to gain knowledge. So the idea that there are these dimensions, they're not all filled with nice things. There are things out there that are predators upon humanity. And we have something they want, and that something is emotional energy. And that emotional energy can take the form of fear. It can take the form of lust. So I've also written a book, not so popular, unfortunately. I never really understood why, but about the demons that come and, I don't know what your audience is like, but the succubi and incubi and the old hag. And these are entities that basically come, and I've experienced one on a train to Germany, which is why I wrote the book and did the research, because it happened to me, and I'm like, wow, And these things will come and they'll sit on you, and they're basically they provoke a sexual response, even though you're in a state where you would think that was impossible. And that's the energy that they're looking to feed from, is that lust or that sexual energy. So I think that the story of the vampires feeding on blood. Blood is the life force. So it's kind of symbolic of the same thing, which is feeding on your emotional energy or your emotional life force. And these intradimensional beings are capable of, I think, coming into your personal existence. I'm not necessarily sure that they enter our shared existence, but I think they can enter your personal existence. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Like with the black-eyed children, like you say, like they'll know people's names, which is really creepy, about that. So, like you say, if they share the existence, and somehow they're either coming back and forth, and we're not seeing them, then they decide to go to physical form, or they're just around us in a different dimension.
Yeah, I think that they choose their victims carefully. I think they choose people that are vulnerable at that particular point in time, emotionally or whatever. And certainly, what I came to the conclusion when I wrote that first book after doing that course of magic was that on the other side, wherever that is, my fear was lighting me up like a Christmas tree. Mm-hmm. So I was an obvious target. Oh, look at this guy shedding fear energy all the time, and all we have to do is, take his keys from the window ledge and put them in the bathroom sink and lunch.
Hey, I admit it. I live in a haunted house, and I have the TV on all night long.
Really? Well, but don't they use the TV at all? Because sometimes they'll use electronic devices, switch it off, switch it on. I don't want to scare you, but they can even use the TV static to manifest their own voice or whatever.
Sure. I've never had a big problem with the TV. Years ago I did, when I was younger, because it would turn on and off. Yeah. But now it's not so bad. It's the computer. They like to hit on my computer and my cell phone.
Yeah. No, I often leave the light. Well, the light in the hall.
And the lights. Yeah.
I often leave a light on in the hall. I don't like to wake up in the dark, in a strange place, scared. I tend to. What causes me more problems than anything else are nightmares, dreams. I have very crazy, convoluted, complex dreams. I say to my daughter, she's 13, and sometimes I say, I'm not sure whether this is my life or this is my dream, because my dreams are more convoluted and more complicated than my life. And sometimes she'll say to me, she'll come running in and wake me up, and she's like, "Dad, you're screaming again." And so it's, that's when I'm vulnerable. When I wake up from one of these nightmares and my heart's going like crazy and I'm sweating and it's all dark and I'm like, I'm still in that nightmare for a few seconds, that's when I'm vulnerable. But I protect myself.
Do you think you're sensitive?
Oh yeah, I've been psychic all my life, and yeah, definitely. I mean, what I'm doing these days is dowsing earth energy lines across the Czech Republic, and writing books about. I tend to write books on anything that takes my fancy. So, unlike some paranormal people that just write about paranormal stuff, I'll throw out a ghost book and then a book on magic and then some poetry and you know, take your pick. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't.
I love your books.
I enjoy doing all of it.
I've been reading your books for years. I love your books. That's why I'm so excited to get you on, because I'm a big fan. With these black-eyed kids, black-eyed children, black-eyed kids, there's adults too, right? Because I've read reports of being black-eyed adults.
Black-eyed adults, and there's even white-eyed adults as well.
I've never heard of the white-eyed ones. Ooh, that's scary.
Yeah, apparently there are white-eyed ones. The adults sometimes are with the kids, so you'll get some stories where the people notice, maybe from their front window, kids and adults hanging around that look strange and start to make them nervous. And then sometimes the adults will show up at the end of the encounter and collect the kids. And sometimes the adults show up all by themselves. So there's a couple of good stories in the book, True Encounters, where things like the sales guy comes to the door and he's saying to the father of the house, you know, let me in so I can show the things. And the kid who's looking out the window can see that this man has black eyes. And he's saying to his dad, don't let him in, don't let him in. And this is a black-eyed adult. The Walmart stories are generally adults as well. And there's a couple of good stories in the book where the daughter's left in the car, and black-eyed kids are knocking on the window. Meanwhile, the mum is shopping in Walmart, and what happens is she bumps into some strange black-eyed person in the store, and so they're both scared to death. So there's lots of stories. And then the white-eyed kids are just a couple of stories which are really quite puzzling, because the white-eyed tend to hunt the black-eyed, so it seems. And there's one story where the man or the woman is being pursued by a black-eyed person and feeling very scared, and then they're bumped into by another person who has white eyes, who tells them, don't be worried, I'm going to deal with this for you. Just be calm. But I suspect the white eyes and the black eyes denote just the level of the demonic entity, because in magic and in demonology, a white demon is higher and more powerful than a black demon.
Sure. Makes sense. Wow.
Yeah.
See, I didn't know about the white-eyed one. I gotta start doing research into that now. That would really creep me out. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no. Well, on the book, I mean, the book I put out, that's the first version that you're showing, and then I put out a little book of stories, and then I thought, well, you know, let's put them together. So I put out a compilation called Chilling Tales of Black-Eyed Kids, which is the one that sold really quite well. And then just recently I did a deal with Raven Tales Publishing, and what we're doing is we're going to put out a third edition with some additional material and professionally edited. This one will be much more, I tend to do my own books, you know, I self-publish and all that kind of stuff. This one's going to be a really professional version, and I'm hoping they've sold about 5,000 copies, which is pretty good. And I'm hoping with a more professional marketing approach, it might get to a really good audience, maybe 20,000, something like that. That would be nice, because then, you know, the hobby then starts to look interesting.
Right. When you research these books, is it information primarily from the internet, or do you go out and talk to people?
It depends what the topic is and who I think I can reach. So I always start off with internet research, and I mean, the internet is great for that kind of thing, digging around, and of course I even know how to do it in Czech, which gives you a slightly different view of the world. And then, if depending on the topic, I'll go start talking to people that I know, particularly in the magic community or in the paranormal community that I know of, and try to pick people's brains. Yeah. And sometimes the idea comes from talking to people, as opposed to stories that have been submitted. Sometimes the idea comes from my own experience. Like I told you about the incident. I was on a train. I live in the Czech Republic, and I was going on a business trip to North Germany. And it's only like maybe 500 miles. So it's just a bit too long to drive, but too short to fly, especially if to fly you've got to drive 100 kilometers to one airport and then 100 kilometers at the other end, right? So this time I thought, I tell you what, I will do something I've always wanted to do, which is I'll take an overnight train, right? So I took an overnight train from Vienna out to Dusseldorf in Germany. And I booked myself a top-notch single-person sleeper. And trust me, you go in there and it's like, wow, it's got shower and it's got, it hasn't got a television, but it's all mod cons, drink tray, breakfast, dinner, all this kind of stuff. And I thought, I'm really going to have a nice evening. And I pulled everything down, made the bed, and I thought I'll jump into bed early because it arrives at 6 o'clock in the morning, so I'll have to get up early. So I got into bed and I switched the lights out, and the sort of motion of the train, rocks you gently to sleep. And then I woke up, and I'm awake, and I felt this weight sitting on my belly. And I open my eyes and I see this shadow creature glaring at me, leering at me. And I can't move. I can't move a finger. I can hear the people in the carriage next door laughing and joking. I can hear the rattles of the train, but I can't move. And I'm looking at this thing, and I'm thinking to myself, no, you're not going to do, no. And I'm struggling, and eventually, I don't know why, but eventually I came out of it, and this thing floated up like a black smoke and sat in the luggage rack. Wow. So I'm glaring at this thing in the luggage rack, and I suppose it's glaring at me. And I did a couple of things that I thought would get rid of it, and then I went for a walk and bought a beer and talked to some people, came back, got back into bed, tried to sleep. Same thing happened again. So rather than be a nice, interesting overnight ride to Germany, it was like I was up all night. I don't go to sleep. I don't close my eyes. Because every time I did this sleep paralysis would happen, and this thing would come down from the luggage rack and attack me again. So I thought to myself, well, what could this be? And I started reading up about sleep paralysis and the night hag, the old hag, the nightmare. And of course, materialistic science says that it's a product of sleep paralysis. Mm-hmm. But I came to a different conclusion. Sleep paralysis is what the entity uses in order to attack you and basically create your fear and sexual energy that it can then take. And I'm not the only, I'm not the only person that thinks this. If you read other people's books on succubi and that kind of entity, you'll find that a few people have floated this hypothesis that materialistic science has got it back to front. Sleep paralysis isn't the thing that causes the experience. The experience causes the sleep paralysis, or the entity causes the sleep paralysis. So, and then I don't know if you come across another book I wrote about living ghosts, and this one got really interesting. My mum, who lives in the UK, I called her one day. And she said to me straight away, she said, Gary, you know about this stuff. I keep seeing my sister. I said, well, that's good. She said, no, she's not here. She's still at home, but I keep seeing like her ghost. Mm. So I said, well, describe. She said, well, one day I looked out the window and she was at my front door, and then she wasn't. Another day I was in the kitchen cooking and I turned around, she was behind me, and then she was gone. What could it be? Do you think she's going to pass away? So I said, Mum, I have no idea. But I started doing research. And of course, I got into this idea of bilocation, where saints and magicians and alchemists and all kinds of people are in two places at once. They can be in two places at once. And I came to a conclusion, maybe wrong, but I still thought it was quite interesting, that in my mum's case, it could be just that, her sister is sitting at home, and she's an older person and she's got nothing to do, and she's thinking about my mum very hard and going into a trance, and she's projecting herself into my mum's reality just temporarily. And this is how, this experience was working. So the whole book, excuse me, is an exploration of the living ghost phenomena, bilocation, astral projection, all of those kinds of things, doppelgangers, that kind of thing.
Oh my gosh, doppelgangers, yes.
Yeah.
Is it true? I mean, well, I think one of the stories I read, Time Life had a really good series years ago on paranormal stuff and legends. And I remember in particular there was one out of Scotland about a doppelganger, and the way the story went was, if you looked in a mirror and saw yourself looking over your shoulder, then that meant you were going to die. That was your doppelganger coming to get you.
Yeah.
Creepy stuff like that.
Creepy, but I don't know that I believe it.
You are so fast. I mean, like you say, you've written all these topics and stuff that interests you. I tend to do that too.
Yeah.
And,
well,
go ahead.
I'm just one of those people that I just keep doing stuff. I mean, I have a full-time job, but I write, I blog, I'm making videos now, I make music. Sorry, excuse me. Okay. And I just always have to be doing something.
Now, going back to the train, how long did that last? Did that situation last all night, or was it just something that happened in a certain section of the track?
The two paralysis moments were probably only 90 seconds apiece, but I could still see the entity sat in the luggage rack. It's like smoky, almost like a cigarette smoke had gone up, into the ceiling. I could see it all night long.
Wow! And
I suspect that it lived in that little carriage and made use of whoever was occupying that carriage each evening.
That's what I was kind of thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
That, or it was a section of track, that you went over. That's something, that it just was attached to and attached to the train.
Yeah.
And whatever. That's craziness.
And that kind of thing. That sort of feel again. The feeling of being powerless because you can't move. That creates the fear straight away. So that's why I think sleep paralysis can be used as a tool by these entities in order to get you into the way they want you, which is shedding off this emotional energy.
I would think, after being in England, I have family in England and visiting England. The ghosts in Europe, the entities in Europe, are more aggressive than they are here. For whatever, maybe because they've been around longer.
Maybe, but that raises an interesting point, which is back to the black-eyed kids, which is when I was doing the research, I told you that I had a sense that the modus operandi of the encounter seemed to be related to the culture. So in the UK, the black-eyed kids were also a big thing, and there was a big media blitz on black-eyed kids a few years ago. But these kids were ghost kids, right? Cannock Chase, the black-eyed kid of Cannock Chase. And this was a ghost kid, so people would be walking through this beautiful forest park, and they'd hear moaning, and then they'd come across this girl who'd be crying and rubbing her eyes and saying, I'm lost, help me, I'm lost. And when she looked up, black eyes. And again, that would cause fear in the person experiencing this. But then the kid would vanish. So they called it the black-eyed ghost. And all of the stories that I could find in the UK, except one, were all about black-eyed ghosts. Now, the one story in the UK that was exactly the same sort of modus operandi as the North American ones was the result of an American living in London who had a knock on his door opened it and found black-eyed kids who wanted to come in. So that kind of reinforced for me that the way the entity approaches the person is based on the culture and the cultural characteristics of creating fear. So in Britain, it's the ghost, the black-eyed kid ghost, the wailing ghost, the ghost that starts out nice but ends up attacking you. And in America, it's these little kids that come in, stand on the doorstep that look innocent, but actually that true evil incarnate. And there's a couple of stories that took place in France where it's more like two guys driving along, and they see some people at an isolated farmhouse, and as they drive up, they pull up to ask directions, and it's an entire family of black-eyed people. So they drive away just as quickly, right? And so that's a different approach on the same entity. In the case of the North American indigenous people, it's small kids in the forest, coming from the forest with black eyes, right, and trying to infect the rest of the tribe with whatever it is that causes the black eyes. So in different cultures, the story of black eyes manifests itself in different ways, but the entity has the same objective of causing fear and feeding off that fear energy. That was the conclusion that I came to in the book.
Along that line, I just read on some website, because they're, like you say, they're everywhere. I mean, all those stories are everywhere, about a particular road. I couldn't figure out whether it was in England or whether it was in the U.S., but there was supposed to be a particular road somewhere where they, like you said, they come out of the woods. Mm-hmm. And, they would come out of the woods at night. So this man had gone out there by himself doing a Facebook Live, I guess, to walk the road, thinking he'd be safe during the day. And then he could hear them in the trees as they were coming down through the trees and stuff after him. And he got the car.
Again, that sounds similar to that native indigenous North American type cultural experience. I guess these days that it could be accused of cultural appropriation. I definitely have this idea that these things exist and that they utilize certain storylines and formats that are more frightening in a particular circumstance. And I think they've been doing that for as long as humanity's been around. Mm-hmm. So that's the truth of the matter.
Where do you think there's more sightings than others?
The most sightings, in terms of the stories that were submitted through the website and by email to me, were mostly set in the part of the US where I lived, which was like Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi River Valley in the deep south there. Why that would be, I do not know, but that's where most of them. And there's one beautiful story that I got that I do like to recount, and it's not black-eyed kids, but it has an element of the same kind of storyline. And it's a couple who have family in Texas, and they live in Oklahoma. So periodically they'll drive to visit family. And this time they decided, sick and tired of driving down the freeway, so they'd take the back roads. And they're driving down the back roads, and the guy notices that they're actually running short on gas. And lo and behold, a gas station's coming up as they round a bend. So they pull into the gas station, and the lady gets out, and she goes into the store. And as she's walking through the store, she's looking around, she's thinking, well, this is weird. Everything's oldie-worldy, like the till is old-fashioned, everything's covered in dust. The Coke cans are the old-fashioned Coke cans. And so she gets kind of nervous and scared, and she leaves the store, and she finds the husband is trying to fill the car with gas, and there's a little boy. And the little boy's saying to him, "Take me fishing. Take me fishing. I want you to take me fishing." And the wife looks at the husband looks at the wife, and they both jump in the car and drive away just as fast as they can, leaving this little boy ranting about take me fishing, right? And they get about 3 or 4 miles up the road and they come into a small town with a diner. So they're really, scared and shook up by it. So they go into the diner for something to eat, and they're talking about what happened, and the waitress comes over and they said, gosh, we had a really weird experience at the gas station down the road. And the waitress looks at them blankly and said, gas station? There's no gas station down the road.
Whoa.
That's one of my favorites. Sorry. And the little boy, take me fishing, let me in and take me fishing. It's like a black-eyed kid type scenario, isn't it? Same sort of thing, demanding and seeking permission. That's the other thing that we didn't really mention is that when they ask to be let in, basically that's like in demonology. The demon wants to cross the threshold and needs to have your permission to do it. So if you are in a situation, listeners, watchers, where a black-eyed kid is on your doorstep, the last thing you do is let them in, because you've given them permission, not just to let them into your house, but let them into your soul.
Well, that's also true for the vampire religions too.
Yeah.
To give them the okay to come to the door.
Yeah, and I did a bit of, in the book, I have a chapter on black-eyed kids and, black eyes and the meaning of black eyes and how black eyes are used by Hollywood in horror movies all the time these days to denote evil. And even how some psychological literature, even scientific psychological literature, talks about people with very bad tempers developing black eyes, almost as if they take on a demonic anger aspect and get black eyes in the process, which I've never experienced myself, but apparently it does happen. That's
fascinating.
So I did try to look at the phenomena in multiple different ways, and I got quite a lot of reviews for that book, mostly good, but I got one review the other week that really annoyed me, because the person who reviewed it said that I'd taken all the stories from Reddit and Wikipedia, and she said this because the stories were in italics, and therefore I must have lifted them. And I'm thinking, well, some people you just can't help. The reason why the stories are in italics is because they're not my writing.
Right.
There's somebody else's writing, and each one of them is accredited at the bottom to who, unless they didn't want to be accredited, to the person that submitted the story. And the book quite clearly states where the stuff comes from, and there isn't a story in the book that comes from Wikipedia. But some people just, like to write bad reviews, I guess. But I was pretty disappointed by that review, because on Amazon these days you can't respond anymore.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. Do you see these things approaching, like you say, a certain type of person, a certain age group, because they know they can get to them better?
To be honest, I didn't see any pattern in terms of a certain age group or gender, but quite often they did seem to try to look for older couples, I would suggest. But that's not anywhere near like a rule. I mean, they also they tried, men, women of all ages, but there was a sort of maybe half of the stories were older couples living alone.
Of course.
And in relative isolated areas, not like in a block of apartments in downtown somewhere, but more in a house on the edge of a town in the countryside.
That was my next question. Was are they doing this on like not city blocks? Because I live in the county, but not way out. It's just a normal housing thing, or is it more like outside where people are more cut off?
I don't get the impression that it's cut off, but not lots of people walking around. Let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. I mean, like I said, you've got stories submitted by servicemen living on US Air Force bases. And you're wondering to yourself, well, how does a small child pass security to get into such a place. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I don't think they are physical kids after all. I think they manifest and look physical, but I think they're entities that are not in our reality.
Well, I don't know about you. I mean, if a couple of small kids come to my door at 4 a.m., I'm going to be suspicious.
Well, I mean, yeah. If anybody comes to my door at 4 a.m., I'm going to be suspicious. Yeah, I mean, even when I lived in the US, I would have been suspicious of people at 4 o'clock in the morning knocking on my door.
It also amazes me that now that people have all these Ring devices, on their doorbells, that nothing's ever been caught on camera either.
Well, that's the other thing, is that you have all these stories of people who claim to have had this experience, and then they've locked the kid out, and the kid has been banging on the door, and they describe the noise like so loud it would wake the dead, and yet the neighbor, who's only a matter of feet away, never heard anything all night long. And that's why it seems to me as if they manifest in an individual's experience, but they're not really there. And that's why I don't think they leave any physical evidence unless they want to. There's no footsteps, no footprints. They don't leave any evidence they were ever there. They're not seen by anybody. For example, there's a couple of stories where the person reported the kids to the police, and the police did probably a rudimentary check, and nobody else saw any kids, so they discounted the call. So it's real to you, and it's in your sphere of reality. But I don't think if there was a crowd of people around, they wouldn't see. And even the same thing in there's a couple of stories in the book about black-eyed adults who bump into people and show the black eyes and scare the person. And when the person turns to other people and says, "Did you see that guy? Did you see that guy?" Nobody saw them except the person having the encounter. So it's almost like they're only in your reality. And as I finish the book, I love the way I finish the book, because I finish it off by saying, the other part of this whole thing is that they do say once you've heard of the black-eyed kids, you will experience them.
See, that's the knock on my window, I tell you. The other thing that strikes me, like you talk about, where that particular person will see them and the other ones won't. Maybe these people are sensitive to begin with, and that's why. They're tuned into whatever frequency these things can come out.
That's difficult to test when you're just relying on stories and that kind of thing. For me, because I know that I am sensitive, I do tend to practice self-defense, and I do have some I was going to say rituals, but that would be too formal. But some ways of just protecting myself, because I'm sitting writing these books and reading these stories, and I've got to be able to switch that all off and go back to being a normal TV watching person and not have strange experiences because of what I'm doing. I don't want to attract anything.
I was going to say, because you've got kids, obviously. I mean, do you really put a lot of protection up around you? Because, I mean, you don't want anything going after your kids either. Because if you're sensitive, one or both, or all your kids are sensitive too.
Well, my daughter appears to be sensitive, and I have 3 adult sons in Texas. One of my sons appears to be as well, but not all. And I can't necessarily protect them per se. I can only protect the environment that they're in, and part of that is by mindfulness, what you're spending your time thinking about, and part of it is just simple things like just imagining a barrier of light around yourself or something along those lines. I even when I go dowsing, I take care to protect myself first, because you never know. Dowsing is using the same intuitive spiritual side of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and you can run into things you wouldn't want to, because you've opened yourself up in order to do the dowsing. So I protect myself even then.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, because I know that. I mean, my mother, taking care of her, my elderly mother, because she was sensitive. And I remember doing some investigations, and a particular one out by the river where it involved mobsters, in a speakeasy. And I came home from it. Everything was fine. About 3 in the morning, she wakes up screaming, and I said, "Well, what's wrong?" And she says, "They're throwing people in the river. They're throwing people in the river. The bodies.
Yeah.
And somehow it came home and affected her without me
Yeah.
realizing it. That's why I was wondering about your kids.
No, that can happen, and I mean, with my daughter, she definitely is open, but I try not to bother her with this stuff. I mean, I don't actively, maybe the dowsing a little bit, and earth energies and the sort of positive side of it, but I try not to. There's one of the big podcasting guys. He's the voice for my books. If you do the audio, if you take an audio book, Darren Marler, his name is. He does the Weird Darkness podcast. Sorry to advertise somebody else's on yours.
That's okay.
He's really good at reading the creepy story. But Darren is a voice artist, so his voice is on all different kinds of YouTube videos. It could be anything from airplane safety videos to unwrapping of different products. And because my daughter has heard him reading my books, every time she puts on a YouTube video and it's Darren's voice, she goes, "Oh, no, I can't listen. Scary."
I think I might have come across one of his videos on Black-Eyed Children the other night.
Yeah.
That I was listening to. He's got a really cool voice.
Darren reads a lot of the stories he reads a lot of my books for audiobooks, and we also did a deal where he would read a lot of the submissions on the website on his podcast and drive people to the website, which was very good, because how do you promote a website these days? It's pretty difficult.
It's hard because there's so many fish. It's such a big pond.
Well, the problem is social media like Facebook. They Facebook is not an equal deal anymore. They get to create a profile and sell it to advertisers of you.
Mm-hmm.
But if you put something on a Facebook page, they only spread it to about 5 people unless you pay them an advertising fee.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
but it didn't used to be that way. I mean, that's their business model.
What do you have to say to people that might think they ran into a black-eyed kid, or how to deal with it?
How to deal with it?
Yeah.
How to deal with it is to basically do your best to ignore them and try not to be frightened, and try to rationalize it, shut the door, don't let them in, ignore whatever, and just get on with your life, and don't dwell on it. I think the more that you dwell on something like that, the more you're attracting the entity.
Real quick, you were talking about how they can manifest themselves and appear wherever they want to. That makes a lot of sense, because like the people that have seen them come to their back doors.
Yeah.
Because somehow they have to, get in through the backyard, the gates or whatever. Especially in the United States, everybody's got a gate on their gate to go into their backyard. So somehow they're getting in the backyards and they're knocking on the back doors. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good story in the book as well, where they are looking out the back window of their house, and they're looking straight out, but the child, because he's lower down and looking up, says to the parents, "Well, who's the man standing on the electric wire?" And there's a black-eyed person standing on the electric wire, staring down at them through the window.
Wow, that's creepy stuff. Thank you so much. This hour has blown by, and I mean, this is incredible.
Yeah.
For me to talk to you is incredible, because, like I said, I have been a fan of yours for years. And
Cool. Very
wow,
nice. Thank you.
I was so glad you came on. How do people find you? How do people get your books?
Well, the books are all on any Amazon site. As I say, most of them are audio plus Kindle. You can also get paperbacks of the bigger ones. Just search on G. Michael Vasey. I go by G. Michael Vasey, even though I'm Gary, just because I wanted to keep the professional life separate. But with Google, it figures out, so it doesn't matter. And yeah, I mean, I direct people to My Haunted Life 2, TOO, as in also, myhauntedlife2.com. That's the site with the stories. Leave your story there, leave your experience there. I sometimes give people free books if it's a great story. And if you're interested in more the magical side, earthmagicbrunner, BRNO.com. But I'm all over the internet.
Fantastic, fantastic. I would love to sit down with you again at some point, if that's okay, and do another interview and talk about your other stuff. Because
and by that time, you know, maybe my hair's long enough to actually put in a tail and look semi-decent, you know.
Yeah, you got so much stuff to talk about. It's just incredible. It's just absolutely incredible.
No, there's lots of stuff we could talk about. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much.
No problem.
And I know it's getting late your time too, so I'm going to let you go. And yeah, again, I'll be in touch to get you back on because I really want to discuss the other
Sounds
books.
good. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Thank you, sir.
No problem. Bye-bye.
Have a good one.
Yeah.
All right. That was G. Michael Vasey. I mean, like I said, I am a huge fan of this man's work, and I must have like 3 or 4 of his books. You can't compare. Fantastic. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for coming today. Let's talk about a few things here. Our numbers are definitely going up, and I'm real proud of that. We're getting a lot of downloads on YouTube. Go over to our YouTube page and become a subscriber because we want to keep bringing these shows to you guys. We love doing them, and there's going to be some that I'm probably going to do during the day because they are either in England or Europe. So keep an eye out for that. And if you can help us out a little bit, we are a nonprofit paranormal investigation team, so all this comes out of pocket for us. So if you could help us out a little bit to keep the show on the air, we can keep bringing guests on. Donate to paypal.me at California Haunts because, like I said, we don't have enough people watching to get the whole star thing going on Facebook. So this is the way we do it, paypal.me at California Haunts. Every little bit helps for us to keep the show on the air. Like everything goes out of my pocket. This was great. It was fun. We're going to be on our normal time tomorrow at 6:30. In fact, let me reach down here real quick. This is senility when you can't remember who's on your show, right? Tomorrow we are going to have Mr. Gorg is going to be coming on tomorrow evening at 6:30 p.m. And he is going to be talking about. Let's see, Mr. Gorg. Hello. See, this shows you what I have to do, right? Yeah, Mr. Gorg is going to be on at 6:30 tomorrow. I'm so sorry. I tell you, it's senility. And he's going to be talking about demonic stuff and demonic entities. So we're in some of the cases that he's coming, he's done research on. So he's going to be on with us at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time tomorrow. Again, I thank you guys for coming in. If you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you didn't like the show, share it anyway. Share it with your enemies. We're trying to get the word out. The more the merrier. But I thank you all for coming, and I will see you all tomorrow night. Have a good day.